Felicia Wright is a U.S. Army veteran and former teacher in the Nevada public schools who decided to pull her daughter out of kindergarten for homeschooling and eventually launched a microschool called the Learning Outpost in Las Vegas. The Learning Outpost now serves 22 children, including two of Felicia's own children, and two teachers in addition to Felicia. I had the opportunity to meet Felicia and visit the Learning Outpost recently when I visited Las Vegas, and it's such a special place. So I'm so excited to have Felicia on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
It's great to have you here. I want to talk about the Learning Outpost and kind of your evolution into education entrepreneurship, but maybe we could start with your story, a little bit about your education growing up. What was that like? How did you
Mhm.
go from kind of K to 12 into the US Army and then eventually become a teacher? Kind of what's the backstory there?
I always had a heart for children, like my grandmother was a teacher. So when I was going through high school, I kind of fought against it. Actually, I was like, I want to do this, but all the things that they tell you about teachers, those who can't teach, you don't do well, it's super stressful. So I kind of fought against that. So I went to school to be an engineer, and I found out that was like a big no real quick. And then I wound up joining the army. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give education a go. I was in the army for 6 years. And then while during that time, I was completing my bachelor's in education. And then I started teaching after that. So it was an interesting transition too from being in the military to being a teacher because I was doing my student teaching while I was still in the military, and anybody that knows the military, it's like, pretty raw talking to each other and like, go do this. And then I I do that on the weekends. And then on Monday for my student teaching, I'm like, hey you guys. So it was an interesting transition for sure. But I knew that's where I was supposed to be.
So then what was your experience as a teacher in the public schools in Nevada like? What grades did you teach and what was that classroom environment like for you?
Yeah, I did. My taught in second and fourth grade. And then I started out teaching fourth grade, and then I went into first. And that was actually where my heart was. I taught first the longest, and I really enjoyed teaching first. But I will say, like my very first year of teaching, I kind of knew I was like, I can't do this for 20 years. Like I just knew. I was like, this is really hard. Like really, really hard. So after that first year, I always knew I would do something else, maybe build my own thing. I don't know, but I just knew I was like, this isn't, I can't do this long term. Like the stress is off the Richter scale. And then by the time I got to my last year of teaching, I was like, in my head, this was my internal dialogue of like, see, I knew I shouldn't have become a teacher. Like, forget this. I'm going to go into marketing. So I kind of like fled the classroom actually because that last year the demands just got greater and greater, and there was some kind of shooting. And I remember distinctly that last year they're like, okay, you have to keep all your doors locked. And there was talks about like teachers holding firearms in the classroom, and I was so against that because I mean, I know how to hold a firearm. I was in the military for 6 years. Like, I know all about firearms. I would never have one in the classroom. Never. And after that last year, I just felt so unsafe. And I'm an adult. I was like, I'm an adult. I know how to handle myself. Like, I've done combative things like being in the military, and that last year I just didn't feel safe anymore, and I knew it wasn't a space I wanted for my kids. So I left.
So I want to get more into that in just a minute, but let's go back for a second that even after the first year of teaching, you felt like this is not going to be a long-term pathway for you. And what was it? I mean, you said there was the stress, but what really was happening in that kind of traditional classroom environment that made you think this is not going to be something that I'm going to dedicate a 20-year career to?
Yeah, so that first year I had 34 kids. I was teaching fourth grade and I had 34. And I just remember like I couldn't keep track of it all. And I'm pretty good about staying digitally organized, like with all the kids and stuff. And the work just kept piling on. I had some special ed kids in my classroom at that time as well. So there was additional paperwork on those kids. And then which was a lot, especially because at that time I was learning how to be a teacher. I was learning the software that the school was using. I was learning how to use curriculum. I was learning all my kids. I was learning classroom management, and I enjoy learning, but it had become too much. And at one point, I when I started, I got a particular student, and my administrator's like, I'm going to warn you, you have this student. Mom is intense. That's all I was told. I was like, okay, I can handle it. This mom made me cry like every weekend. She'd send me an email about how bad I was doing. You're just a first year teacher, you're terrible. And I was going home crying every weekend. And I would come up to the school to work on a Saturday. And my oldest, she was one. Yeah, she was one at the time. So I'd bring her pack and play, stick her in the pack and play, she'd play, and I'd work. And it just, my daughter wasn't getting the best of me anymore. And it was super stressful. So I knew after that, I was like, if this is what teaching is, let's throw that out. I was like, no, like 20 years of that, like that's what was going through my head of like, I can't do this for 20 years.
So you stayed in the public school classroom for a few more years. And then you said
Hmm.
you started to feel really unsafe and kind of all came together, really not wanting to be a place for you. And it was a similar story for your daughter when you decided to pull her out of kindergarten. I wonder if you can share that story because it has some parallels to your own.
Yeah, I don't typically share that story a whole lot, but to make a long story short, she she went to school for a week and I pulled her. But during that week, she was getting sick. She threw up in her technology class and I brought her home. She was fine. And then she came home crying on a Friday because the teacher had overshared about why they do hard lockdown drills. And this is kindergarten. So at that point I knew better. I was like, you know what? Like I never wanted to see you in the first place. So it was just an easy to remove her at that point because I I could just see her like dwindling because she was so excited at the beginning of the week, right? She's like, I'm gonna go to school, I got a new backpack, it's gonna be amazing. And then like eventually she fell into like the flow of school and it almost turned into a grind, like I got to go to school again. I got to make sure I get all my work done, like that kind of thing. And I just didn't want that for her.
Yeah, so just that spark for learning, that drive to discover, and that curiosity that within that short period of time, you started to see that dulled, and then sort of having the anxiety around some of the procedures in the school as well. So this was something it sounded like you had been thinking about before. You were thinking about doing something kind of unconventional. When did
Mhm.
that start for you? When did you start to wonder about alternatives?
So, um, when I left, I was like, forget this, I'm not doing this anymore. And I went into marketing, and it was just, while I could do it, it just wasn't fun. And I had this experience where I took my kiddos to the park, like all parents do, and there was this little boy, and he was following me around. I swear he was 2, and he just walked up to me and like put his hands up, and I was like looked at mom. She looked at me. She's like, "I'm sorry, he never does this. He doesn't even like strangers." I was like, "Okay." Well, I kept walking around. He kept asking me like, just pick me up. And mom's like, you can pick him up. I'm like, okay. So I pick up this strange boy, well, stranger, because he's a stranger to me. I pick him up, and I swear it was this moment of like, I felt like he was saying like, "Come back to us, we need you." Um, and then that's when I was like, "Well, maybe I need to give this another go." I've never forgotten that boy. I mean, he was just a baby, but that's what it felt like to me. Like, maybe I was in a weird space that day. I don't know, but it just felt like his soul was telling me, like, "Come back to us. We need you." So at that point, I started tutoring on the side, just to get back into education, flex that muscle again. And I worked with homeschooling families a lot. And then I started hosting classes in the local library. And I started doing YouTube videos online for homeschooling families as well. So I slowly started to get into this. And then once I had all those things in place, the YouTube, the tutoring, and the classes, it just got to the point, it came to a head of like, okay, it's time. When your friends start telling you it's time, I was like, okay, we're gonna try this. And that's how I got to even thinking about starting the micro school.
Yeah, and the microschool really blends sort of all of your talents, right? The creative marketing and the kind of business savviness with this, clear gift that you have for teaching and for being an educator. So, what happened next from pulling your daughter from kindergarten and homeschooling her to then the launch of the microschool?
Okay, so and then there's some struggle in there too. So I had pulled her, and there was back in, I want to say 2019, I had tried to start a micro school, and I actually had a location. I had a yes. I had the website up. It was great. I was like, awesome. And I was starting with very limited funds. So I had a yes. And then because it was with a church in a separate building, then it turned out that the father of the church, he's like, I'm actually being deployed. He's like, and the board wants to talk to you because I'm not going to be here. I'm like, okay, cool. I went into that meeting like, all's good in the neighborhood. And then it turns out it wasn't all good in the neighborhood. There was people on that board that were like, we don't want to do this. This is like, we're just not trying to do this. So I left that meeting pretty devastated. So it was back to like, this isn't for me. And then that was in 2019. And then I just continued to do the YouTube, that kind of stuff, and tutoring. And then um, in the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, the conversation came up again of like, you should try this again. And I was just like, no. And my husband's like, I'm done hearing you whine. Maybe you should try this again. So I I pulled up my bootstraps and I was like, okay, let's try this again. And everything came together the second time around.
So then what happened? Sort of your official
So
launch. Yeah.
yeah. So I went around to churches again because I figured I was like because I started with my own money. Like I didn't have any I don't have any backers or anything like that. So I figured I was like, well, let's try churches because it's mutually beneficial. I mean, churches sit empty all week. I only need it during the week. Like, let's try that. And I found a place and they're like, yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. And it worked. And then I launched, and it was crickets. It was just me and my children for first couple of weeks, which is a little scary. But slowly the word got out and I had people trickling in, which was great, but there was some scary times within that. But I will say, like, once got some core families in here, they just started to spread the word for me because
Mm.
they're so happy here, which I'm so thankful for because I want them to be happy here. So word of mouth has really brought people through the door more than anything.
And so when was the official launch, Felicia?
I launched in May of 2022.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So
I
not
it
even a
started with
full
summer camp.
year. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
That's great. And it's for homeschoolers. So the students who attend are recognized homeschoolers. They come to this beautiful space. It's a freestanding building on a church
Yes.
property, but not at all affiliated with the church. and has
Mhm.
lovely, bright classroom space and outdoor space for the students. And it's just a really lovely microschool environment. And then, as I said, you have two hired teachers in addition to you. Um, what are the options for families in terms of enrollment?
Yeah, so I offer either like a full-time because our program is Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. So I offer either a full-time or a flex day schedule. So I do have kiddos on full-time, including my own because I'm here. And then the flex day schedule, parents can decide to have their kids come anywhere from 2, 3, or 4 days a week. So I find that a lot of my families come 3 days a week, which has been beautiful to see because they still get to travel with their families and still get the experience of being here at TLO with their peers. So that has really been the game changer for the business of like the flexibility and the kids as homeschoolers, they still get the schooling experience of like, hey, I was able to go to school today because that's the terminology that they use while we're not a school. That's what kids know. And I think it's beneficial, especially even with my own, like when they're out on the street with the kids that go to public school, they have all these stories. I did this at school, blah, 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 blah. Now, my kids have those types of stories as well. Like, we did this today, and all the kids that come here. So that's really been really beneficial for the babies that come here.
Yeah, and that's really one of the benefits of the microschool model when it is using kind of that homeschool structure or the homeschool foundation, in that families could use the Learning Outpost, for example, as a full-time schooling alternative all week, or they can
Mhm.
use it as a part-time supplemental program and
Yes.
still retain that freedom and flexibility that the homeschooling lifestyle provides. So it's no wonder that this model, it continues to gain popularity and traction, especially over the past few years. And I wonder what you see from the families who come and talk to you. What are they looking for? Are they currently have their kids enrolled in school and are looking for something different, or are they kind of waiting to see what you're offering before they even enroll their kids? Who are these parents?
Yeah, the vast majority were already homeschooling. And what they're looking for is just a a way for their kiddos to interact in a setting where they can interact and learn with their peers and have time to socialize with their peers. That has been the vast majority. Now, I have had kiddos come from a traditional school setting, and I've found that like the ones that come from those settings actually, and this is something that we're dealing with now, are actually coming in with quite a bit of trauma, just because of what has happened. So the ones that have come from a traditional setting, they're leaving because of traumatic experiences, and then they're coming here um because they're kind of at the point of like, well, this none of this is working, we have to try something new. And that's something that we're navigating right now, of all all our kiddos that have all these different experiences that they're coming in with. And we're in constant communication with the parents. I have one parent, she talks to me every day about how her daughter's doing because of her previous experiences. So that's something that we're navigating right now, but the vast majority of our kids were already homeschoolers.
Well, it's wonderful that these families have you there as an option when the
Thank you.
conventional school isn't working. And if things are happening in the school, like bullying or children not
Mhm.
feeling safe in that environment, that they can find you and have a different way. So, what does the kind of curriculum and structure look like at the Learning Outpost?
Yeah, so I always tell parents and everybody that comes in, like, we're not in a rush here, but we do focus on academics and social emotional learning. So in the mornings, we will do a project. So right now, well, we finished up bugs. We're going into zoology, which all the kids are excited about. And they actually picked the next unit that we're doing. They're like, what do you guys want to learn about? They're like, we want to learn about animals. So that's what we're doing. So we'll do a whole group lesson, like that will be zoology, and then they'll break off into their rooms. So one room is like a pre-reader, beginning reader room, which is kindergarten, first, second, and then the other room is more advanced readers, third, fourth, fifth. and they'll do a zoology lesson, and the units typically last like 3 to 4 weeks. And then they also have access to computer programs online that hits them where they're at academically. So we use Lexi and Beast Academy if anybody's familiar. So that's in the morning, and then they have lunch for an hour because I believe like they need time to socialize and do fun things and eat versus like hurry up and eat, let's get back to work. We're not doing that here. And then in the afternoons, we have a variety of things scheduled. So on Mondays, we have a Spanish teacher that comes in. Tuesday, Wednesday, we are actually going to be learning how to play the recorder. You remember the recorder? Throwback to the recorder. That's what we're doing on those days. Thursday, organization called Nevada 4-H comes in and does classes with them. So it's a nonprofit, and they've typically, well, they have they usually do farming and gardening, that kind of thing, and that's what they're actually going to be gardening with them here in the next couple of weeks. But they've done STEM classes with them. They with them about how to healthy snacks. They made yogurt parfaits. That was a lot of fun. So that's on Thursdays. And then Fridays, like we'll do like an art or science lesson or even a community lesson about how to be a good friend, conflict resolution, those sorts of things. So that's kind of how we have the day broken down. We don't test the kids. There might be a spot check here and there just so we can better assist. But other than that, we don't give tests. There's no homework. The homework in the welcome packet says, like, please spend time together as a family, because I believe that's more important than anything that I can give them. Be together as a family. But that's kind of the lowdown on TLO.
Yeah, and so you have 22 students now, mixed ages. So another one of the kind of characteristics and benefits of the microschool model is that kind of mixed age, one room schoolhouse feel, where you have older students interacting with younger students, still an individualized curriculum, but that kind of peer learning with all different ages. What does the future for the Learning Outpost look like? I guess what are the ages now of your kids, and do you see the Learning Outpost kind of growing with them, or do you see sort of another pathway?
Yeah, like I feel like sometimes I tell myself my plans are too grandiose, but they're necessary. So right now we're K through fifth grade, but I want a K through 12th grade option for families, because when it comes down to it, everybody that walks through the door, they chose this for a reason, this alternative method for a reason. And I hate the idea of like once they age out, I'm like, bye, back to the drawing board for these families, because it already took so many of them so much time to find me. So to throw them back out into the world without a solution, like I hate the idea of that. So I want a K through 12th grade microschooling option for families. It's going to be hard. I can't do it in this facility. I need either a bigger facility or a second facility for the upper ages, but that's the plan for TLO, because I've even had parents, one parent had I've actually had a couple parents ask me, they're like, well, what are you doing moving forward? Like, my kid's going to age out soon. Like, her daughter is third grade and she's worried about it now. And I'm like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So that's really at the forefront of my brain, like all the time. How are
Yeah,
we moving forward?
and also must be somewhat gratifying for you, though, that you have families who are so happy, who are so satisfied with what you're providing, that they want more of it, and they don't want to think about their child's education without you and without the Learning Outpost. So hopefully that's a motivation as you deal with sort of the challenges of expansion. But you're
Hmm.
also located in Las Vegas, Nevada, that is an emerging hub of education, entrepreneurship, and microschools, according to Dawn and Ashley Soifer from the National Microschooling Center that's based in Las Vegas but serves microschool founders nationally. There are about 25 microschools in about a 10-mile radius of the Las Vegas Strip, currently serving more than 300 students. And they expect that number will more than double to over 600 students within the next 18 months. So just such an exciting time. Do you feel that too? Do you feel like there's this energy for alternative education in your area?
Yeah, like it's really interesting to see because there's more inquiry about it. Like, what is this micro schooling? Like, how can my child fit into that? Like, I listen to like some of the things that parents say, like in Facebook land, like parent groups, and there a lot of people are looking for something different. Like they're like, this is not working for my kid. What do I do? Where do I go? Which is it is really exciting because now we're not left into like the shadows. It's like it's really starting to come out like this is what's wrong with public school, like, and parents are starting to leave. And I believe that's the only way that real change can occur because I think especially here in Clark County, they've had it's always been a conversation of like how deficient Clark County is. We're not doing well as far as being ranked nationally. But now that I feel like that conversation will be pushed forward more and they might actually change, make real change because parents are seeking alternatives. So I think that's really beneficial because not all kiddos can go the alternative route. So it's like, what about those babies? So if enough people say, hey, like, we're doing something different, maybe the public school system will change, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I think, a positive prediction, right? That the competition created by microschools and schooling alternatives will lead conventional public schools to say, oh, now we have to compete for these families, that there's something we're doing that's not attractive right now. And maybe we can learn from this more individualized, more kind of student-centered approach that a lot of these microschools and alternative learning models are embracing. And so, as you think about your experience of moving from a classroom teacher to an education entrepreneur, what is some advice that you would have for other teachers or other parents
Mhm.
who might be thinking about launching their own microschool or schooling alternative or learning model? What would you say they should think about?
Well, I think you have to be pretty brave to even go down this road because even though it seems simple, it really isn't when you're going against the grain of like a whole community, right? Like we all grew up and I mean I knew I grew up in public school. So going against the grain is really hard. So you have to be pretty brave, but also like if you're starting something new, like I would say tell more people than you think. I was pretty quiet about it in the beginning, and I wish I would have been more vocal because there's so many people willing to help in different capacities, right? Because I kind of took everything under my wing of like, I'm going to build the website. I'm going to set up I did everything myself, everything. And by December, I was pretty burnt out. I got pretty sick. So I learned the hard way of like, I can't do it all. So being more vocal about like what you're doing, what you need, and how people can assist you, I think is really beneficial.
And what have you found to be some of the most difficult challenges in being an education entrepreneur?
I would say like finding a space was extremely challenging. And even with this K through 12th grade idea, I'm like, finding a space, I'm like, I have no idea because real estate out here is it's really high. Um, but um, not knowing what you don't know, I think is hard when it comes to business because most of us, meaning the ones that start the micro schools, we're former educators. So we know how to educate, but we don't know anything about business. So it's a bit of an uphill battle of learning. So I mean, the Googler was my best friend. The Googler and YouTube was my best friend. So that was really helpful, but that is the hardest part. It's hard. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's very hard.
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship is hard in any sector, but education entrepreneurs sometimes face various challenges that other entrepreneurs might not, especially when it comes to finding a suitable space that has outdoor space that's zoned for kind of an educational environment. So it can have its share of barriers, and yet it's working, right? You have this booming group of education entrepreneurs in the Las Vegas Valley and more coming along. So it's just great to see that ingenuity from
Yeah.
founders like you who are pushing through despite the barriers to create exceptional learning environments for young people. So,
Yeah, it's
Felicia,
been really exciting too. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So, if my listeners and viewers want to find out more about the Learning Outpost and connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, just go to thelearningoutpost.com. That's the website. You can always send me a direct message through the website as well. Our email is info@thelearningoutpost.com. So you can send a direct email if you have any questions. And then, yeah, just check out the website. All our information's on there. And then I also have some YouTube videos on there. If you're a homeschooler just wanting to get started and need some more information too.
Ah, that's great. Such a resource for families, both in Nevada and outside of Nevada. Well, Felicia Wright, I am so excited to talk with you. So thrilled to see what comes of the Learning Outpost and your expansion plans, and just so thrilled that you spent some time today on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. I like doing this.